everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to talk about 4 books that I read as part of a project I've been doing this year where I'm trying to read a lot of things that I've just never read before. So I've done different genres, different authors, and then towards the end of the year, I basically just put all of those authors and genres and famous books that I haven't got to yet into a jar and pulled out a few and decided to read them in the last part of the year. So I pulled 6 things from that jar with the intention of getting to 3 or 4 of them, and I did get to 4 of them. So we're going to start with Frankenstein. Not at all what I was expecting. I guess I thought it would be more science fiction, maybe with a little horror thrown in. And I think it was partly, I think you could argue that this was science fiction or speculative fiction, but really it's more about the characters, and it's more about like the general idea. I really enjoyed Frankenstein. I should mention I read the 1818 text because I wanted to read the original text, but there's some differences with the 1831 text, which I later learned were mostly about how the characters of Victor Frankenstein and his monster were written, and I think Mary Shelley did a couple of things to make them more sympathetic, maybe. I didn't find them particularly unsympathetic, but neither of them were particularly sympathetic, if that makes any sort of sense. So yeah, it was very different than the picture I had in my head, but not in a bad way. But the biggest difference, I guess, is I thought that the book would be mostly like a commentary on science, on maybe the arrogance of some scientists trying to play God. Maybe it was going to be kind of about like a commentary on the ethics of scientific experimentation. Maybe it would be exploring the ideas of like what boundaries exist in science. And those things are definitely a part of the book, but this was much, much more about parent-child relationship, with a little bit maybe of like nature versus nurture thrown in there, but very much about parent-child relationships, about toxic parent-child relationships, about the responsibility of parenthood, about the consequences of parental neglect. I mean, Victor Frankenstein shirks all of his responsibility towards his creation. He offers no guidance to the creature. He is not a role model to his creature. He takes no care or shows any affection towards his creation. But also, it does kind of explore like accountability, like not just accountability as like a parent, although that's like a big theme, but also taking accountability for your own actions. Like even if you're a child who wasn't offered much guidance or had like a neglectful parent or a toxic relationship with your parent, that doesn't absolve you, I guess, from like being a crap person. That's at least what I got out of it. So really interesting, really enjoyed it. The next book I'll talk about is Crooked House by Agatha Christie. So this was kind of like a standalone, I do believe. I don't think any of these characters pop up in any other Agatha Christie. So Crooked House is the story of this like rich, eccentric family, and they all kind of live together in this like really weird mansion, I guess, kind of like cobbled together with these like little sections. So like the son and his family live over here, and the other son and his family live over here, and like the wife lives down here, and so it's hence the name Crooked House. So it's kind of like this a double meaning of this kind of like hodgepodge house that they all lived in, and also like a house of crooked people, because they're all of course suspects in the murder of the like patriarch of the family, the grandfather, who was this like business magnate, and he was well loved, it seems, by his family. Like, he treated them well. He didn't seem to be like mean or anything. So that's like part of the mystery, is like what was the motivation, but they all kind of have a little bit of a motivation. Otherwise the story wouldn't be very interesting. But even though he wasn't necessarily like mean to any of his children or anything, the murder victim, I forget his name now, but he definitely was like a manipulator, and there's some drama with like the will, and that kind of comes out during the reading of the will. And because of that, and also because of the kind of like rich, eccentric family with like this whole cast of characters, it was really giving me vibes of Knives Out. If you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend it. And although the plots are like quite different, those two things, and also like Knives Out isn't like a dark, scary movie about a murder. It is kind of like there's dark parts, but it's mostly like a dark comedy, I guess. I really enjoyed Cricket House, and I enjoyed Knives Out, and I feel like they gave me the same kind of feelings. I liked all the twists and turns. Like, there's like red herrings that get thrown around, like very typical like cozy mystery type of stuff. But yeah, I understand the appeal of Agatha Christie, and like I'll definitely check out some more of her stuff. I didn't want to like commit. I wanted to read a standalone, but I might like check out either Miss Marple or what's the other one, Perot, or I might just check out another standalone. I don't know, but just to say that if you haven't read Agatha Christie, but you think you'd like a good detective or murder mystery story, then I would recommend Crooked House. I thought it was great. I mean, what do I say without giving away whodunit? I will just say that you do have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit at a couple parts, but it was just kind of like all good fun, I thought. So that was Crooked House. So on to the last two books, which were a little more serious. So I've saved them for the end so that I can kind of like collect my thoughts and ruminate on these a little bit. I think first I'll talk about Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. So this is a nonfiction, and it is a history of loss, essentially. It is kind of like a memoir, I guess. It's Ward's kind of like story of like losing, I think it was 5 young men in her life. I think it was in the span of 4 years. It was something like that. So obviously, this is not a light read. It was very hard-hitting, and I had to kind of digest it in small sections. But this memoir is largely about the reality of growing up Black and in poverty in the South of the United States. And by talking about the deaths of those 5 men, she kind of weaves together this narrative about their deaths and the cause of their deaths. So the cause of all of their deaths are all very different. So it's not like they were all drug related. It's not like they were all like murder victims. It's not like they were all like car crashes. There was a little bit of everything in terms of the cause of death, but the root cause you could trace back to being poor and Black in the South. So even when it didn't seem connected, I think Ward does a really good job of showing you how those things can be traced back to being part of a marginalized Black community in the South. And she really kind of explores the feeling like your life is worthless and disposable. And it was hard to read. It's powerful, but it's also quite nostalgic. And while there were bad things happening in her life while she was young, you get this sense of like warmth and beauty about her community in her childhood. So yeah, it's like this mixture of like nostalgia, but also this like devastation. It was really, 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 really good. The writing is really gorgeous. The story is, I don't know if compelling is the right word, but I would highly recommend it. So the last book I wanted to kind of wrap up is Sula by Toni Morrison. So wasn't my first choice for a book by Toni Morrison that I wanted to read, but it's what I could get at my library. I don't know if everyone's going through a Toni Morrison kick, but all of her other books were checked out. So I read Sula, but I'm not disappointed I read it. I thought it was good, but I've saved this one for last because I feel like this, out of all the books I read, this one was really a thinker. It's not my normal type of book that I read. I think this would have been a great book to read as part of like a buddy read or a book club or something like that, because I think it would have forced me to maybe slow down and dissect it a little more as I read it, because I think there is a whole lot to unpack, and I'm not sure I unpacked a quarter of this book. So it's kind of hard to describe, but I will do my best. And I will say that Sula is mostly about two girls, Sula and Nell, and they're childhood friends. This is set in like the, starts in like the early 20s. So it's mostly about Sula and Nell. They are friends. They live in this Black community in Ohio. Starts in the 1920s and it follows them through to, I think it was like the 40s-ish. They are somewhat opposite in terms of like their personality, but they form a really strong connection, and they kind of like drift apart later in life, with Sula choosing a more like unconventional life. She gets like a post-secondary education, but she's also very sexually promiscuous and like doesn't maybe conform to like norms of the time, whereas Nell remains pretty traditional. She marries, she has kids, and she kind of like lives according to like the code of their community. So that's the story at the surface level. And while the book is about those two characters, they are actually in the book a lot. Morrison takes a lot of time in a short book to introduce us to different characters in this community. It was focused on this community called the Bottom, which ironically are these like hills where the Black population was kind of like, I guess, relegated to back in the 1800s. It's kind of like unfertile land. So you really get the sense of the Bottom as like this place, this community full of these really different and eccentric characters. The book is peppered with like different like town legends, with gossip, with these kind of like wild stories from different people. It's not quite told in vignettes, but it kind of has that feel to it. It's a very quiet book, and it is definitely more about the themes than it is about the characters, I would say. I personally probably would have enjoyed it more if there had been more plot, but that's because that's who I am. I enjoy a stronger plot. But that being said, for a book that was really light on plot, the fact that I enjoyed it as much as I did, I think, is a testament to how good of a writer Toni Morrison is. Her writing, like, I mean, now I understand why she's famous. So the whole point of this project is to like introduce myself to all these famous people and books that I haven't read, but like her writing is just masterful. The book is really woman-centric. There's a lot in this book about mother-daughter relationships, also about friendship between women, but really about mother-daughter relationships. I think to me the biggest theme was that of like good and evil, but in the sense of like that not really being a thing, like inserting some nuance into there where you have good characters and bad characters, but really it's more about ambiguity. That's a better word. That like everyone has badness, everyone has goodness, and like the relative proportions of like how much goodness and badness you are, I guess, deciding to act on in your life. It's really about the ambiguity of people. None of the characters in this book, I think, are above reproach, but I didn't outright hate any of them either. And I think the book really is kind of like a credit to like talking about our humanity, even though the book is full of these really abnormal occurrences and kind of like wild stories. I think it was using that to kind of get at what makes a person, like what causes people to do the things that they do, and like how our past shapes us. I haven't even talked about the two women, their like family history, but I won't get into all that because I'm just going to basically end up summarizing the entire book. So I will definitely be picking up more Toni Morrison in the future. So those were the 4 books that I read to kind of wrap up this reading project of mine. I am definitely going to be reading more from Agatha Christie, Jesmyn, and Toni Morrison. So if those are authors that you're familiar with their work and you want to recommend me something from them, I am all ears. As always, thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope everyone's doing really well, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.